having gone through the 4 guidelines with a little detail like that, we then would have a period of 20 minutes, which would begin something like this. I won't have you do a whole 20 minutes, I'll just describe it. Please sit comfortably on the chairs you're on, and close your eyes slowly, letting go of the environment, the immediate physical situation you're in, letting go also of your interior preoccupations or thoughts or even what I just have been talking about. And maybe for 10 or 15 seconds, just do nothing, just as if you were sort of going to sleep or something. And then when you're sort of quiet, ever so gently introduce the sacred word that you've chosen. And repeat it a few times, but always with great calm. You don't repeat it fast, you don't try to pronounce it exactly. You just let it sort of sit ever so gently on the horizon of your consciousness as the expression of your intention to spend this time completely open to God and His loving, enfolding activity. And then when thoughts come down the stream of consciousness and they attract you in some degree, or maybe repel you and you experience some aversion, then once again, ever so gently, return to the sacred word, as if you were laying a feather on a piece of absorbing cotton. That's a good description. Or as if the sacred word was a drop of dew descending on a blade of grass. That gentleness. So that there's no effort to push thoughts away. There's simply an acceptance of whatever is going by and the insinuation of your basic intention of the will. Now, you may think that this doesn't accomplish anything, but intention is incredibly powerful. Just think of what happens when you got married and said, I do. I do. It's an expression of intention. Change your life. I won't say for the better, but necessarily. But it's powerful stuff. Everybody regards you as married from then on. Or again, if you're Roman Catholic and a priest and you say, this is my body, incredible power takes place. We believe that right then the glorified Christ becomes present. So intention is not to be sneezed at. And in this prayer, intention is everything, really. It's what makes it prayer. Without the intention, there isn't any prayer. There's just a mental exercise. So now that you're deep into quiet and silence, let's pretend that we have meditated this way for about 20 minutes. Now, if you're in a group, the leader keeps track of the time. If you're alone, you have to use a timer or a clock, but it should be something that's very quiet or gentle. Some people even use music. They play something, it trails off, then there's 20 minutes, and then it gently starts up. But don't use something that is shocking, that is too loud, because it will disturb the nervous system and make you feel annoyed, you know, because we have to respect this level of the psyche and treat it with gentleness. That's why we take 2 minutes to come out, to give ourselves time to get used to our ordinary way of thinking again, and perhaps to bring some of the interior silence into our activity as we go about the day. So now let's pretend that we're almost at the end of the prayer, and I'm the leader, and I'm going to say the Our Father to bring you out. Notice that I'll say it very softly so as not to disturb anybody who's at a deep place. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. When you feel ready, please slowly open your eyes. So you give people a few moments to come back into the room and return to their usual thoughts. And this is a time when you could ask them to share their experience if you wish. It's more than one way of doing this. Or you may wish now to add some things that you didn't want to say in the first part because you didn't want to overload people's thinking apparatus so that they would have a hard time quieting down when it came to prayer. In other words, it's good to be severely limited in giving the principles in the beginning so that they get an experience of the prayer as soon as possible, but with the adequate knowledge that going over the 4 guidelines in a little bit of detail can help. So now's the time to say a few other things, or they will usually be elicited by questions if you have half an hour for questions or so. And this might be the time to say the minimum time for this prayer is 20 minutes twice a day. One first thing in the morning and one halfway or more or less through the day. You also ought to tell them that the principal effects of centering prayer are not experienced during the prayer, but in daily life. They may notice they're getting a little more peaceful, or they shout less loudly at the children, or some friend will say, "What's the matter with you?" Well, if the people you live with think you're getting better, it's probably true, because they're the last ones to be convinced, as a rule. So we may not notice it at all, and so that's why one should listen to that feedback. It's a good idea not to do the prayer right after a meal, because then the body will be busy digesting and will draw energy, whereas the nature of the prayer is to let go of all activity, including physiological, in order to be completely open and quiet in the presence of God. Also, some people will not do well if they do it too late in the evening, because as the prayer settles down, it releases some of the energies in the body. And we have to respect the unconscious, and the unconscious has a number of energies that will arise when we are very quiet. Thinking, oddly enough, is like a manhole. It sort of covers over the unconscious, and But when you stop thinking, then you become vulnerable to the unconscious, and both its positive and negative energies may begin to arise. And one of these is just plain energy. So that you may find if you do it just before sleeping, you might sleep for a couple of hours, then you'll wake up raring to go. Or you may stay awake for some hours. So some people this doesn't seem to bother. And I've also known some people who like to pray in the middle of the night, and they develop a system where they wake up about 12 and do the prayer and then go back to bed again. So everybody has to be creative in finding the right time for themselves in the right space. And I might add here, you have to take your family and other obligations into account. You know, you just can't come home at the end of a long day when the children are longing to run into your arms. Your wife or husband throws themselves around your neck and saying, I've been waiting for you all day, and you say, out of my way. I'm heading for the cellar, and I don't want anyone to disturb me for the next hour. I'm going to do my meditation. Well, I don't think this is the way to proceed. I think the Spirit expects us to respect whoever we're living with, and that peace in the home comes before the time of prayer, and it's just up to us to find a suitable time that won't wave the red flag in front of people who are somewhat opposed to this thing. And it will take them a while to get used to it. I mean, at first they won't believe it, but after they see that you're improving a little, they'll see they have an investment in this too, and they'll say, for God's sake, go and do your meditation. You may also notice a few physical symptoms that are surprising the first few times you do this, like a little pain somewhere in the body, or an itch, or a twitch, or a tick. And this is simply some little emotional knot stored in the body from earlier times that is close to the surface of your awareness, and that uses this rest. It's just enough to unwind the knot so it appears as a little discomfort. So if you allow your attention just to flow to that discomfort for a few moments, it usually dissipates. Of course, if it lasts through the whole prayer, you may need to see a doctor or something. But one of the principles to keep in mind is that the body is the storehouse of emotional undigested material, or emotions that were not processed. So it's the place where unprocessed grief is lurking. And you can pick this up in deep massage. You sometimes can even recover the event that happened. But most of the time in this prayer, it's just a very light unloading, a light untying of knots that are near the surface of the body. And so it's better to pay no attention to them, and they'll quickly dissipate in a few minutes. Notice I said let your attention flow to that place that is bothering you, which is against the guidelines, right? Because that would be a thought. Normally you go back to the guidelines. So that's why I call them guidelines. It's what you normally do in centering prayer because it works best under normal situations. But some situations are not normal. So then you have to use common sense and adjust to the situation. And one of these is when you're very sleepy and you keep nodding. Well, it would be much better to open your eyes against the rules, look at the floor and get fully awake, and then start over. Another occasion when it's helpful to remember your flexibility and freedom to adjust to circumstances is when the unloading of the unconscious involves memories that are very painful or emotions that are quite primitive. Usually this occurs in those who are more advanced, although they think they're going backwards. They're actually getting down to business and getting into the deep therapy. But the point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes the emotional rush into awareness that bears no relationship to the immediate path is what we call unloading the unconscious. It means that the body has received so much rest that it can begin to assert its native capacity for health and evacuate what is harmful, just as the physical body evacuates material or toxins or waste products. And so there's a psychological evacuation process. And this is prevented by defense mechanisms, repression, and thinking. Thinking is a marvelous way of not facing the real issues of life. This doesn't mean we think at certain points, but the constant interior dialogue is like a wall of protection against the unconscious. And so when this is broken down regularly by 2 periods a day, you gradually develop the habit of listening to the body a little more, and sure enough, the body begins to tell you what's there, and it's unbelievable what's there, waiting to be processed. And so this is one of these occasions. When this comes up, you can't return to the sacred word. Sometimes the storm is so strong of primitive emotions that you can't even find it. It's like a buoy in a hurricane buried under the waves. Well, then we suggest you can't go back to it, so why not make the distressing situation and the primitive emotions the temporary symbol of your intention to open and to be with God. And then when the storm passes, then you go back to your normal practice of listening to the sacred word. And there may be other instances when you have to adjust to circumstances. Finally, something as profound as this practice is calls for a support system of some kind, to have people you can talk to who have gone through or going through similar experiences, to support someone in the long periods of boredom or dryness with the prayer, to have the opportunity for further input, either from the group or from some spiritual source that's reliable. If I were going to organize a region someday, and there was someone willing to work at it, I would say, why don't you just get your group together and sit down and read one chapter of Open Mind on Open Heart a week and discuss it, say your prayers, and go home. There are 13 chapters in that book, and the last chapter has a whole theology, a post-Vatican II theology, with about 48 different little principles. Some groups have meditated on those principles to good effect. But I think if you want to know what centering prayer is all about, you have to hear the same stuff over and over again. Actually, that's the way contemplative teaching works. The abbot says the same thing over and over again until you're ready to scream. But if you don't scream too loud, you find that you're constantly learning something new, some new nuance that there'd been some obstacle in you to hearing. In other words, the same material doesn't change, but you change. And as you change, you hear it at deeper levels. And that's why it's a very humble way of teaching. And I would say in general that contemplative prayer is not the right vocation for stars, for people who are great talkers. Finally, and there wouldn't be time in an introductory workshop to do this, but it's crucial to have some kind of follow-up. Some kind of follow-up. You can only say so much in a 6-hour workshop, and all that the ordinary person can get is barely to get the 4 principles. So it's very helpful to have some kind of like a 6 weeks program to follow it up, using either the first 6 tapes, if you've got those, or to read the 6 chapters out of Open Mind and Heart and study them together. That gives the principle.